Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So remember yesterday I was having a problem with this particular abbreviation here, and this morning it just came to me that it's the Ein Yosef. The Ein Yosef is a collection of the Agadic material in the Talmud, and it has commentaries. Some great midrashic commentators comment on it, but that's essentially the Ein Yosef, and that's what I think he's referring to. So, and then he says, Ki harav hakotev be'en Yosef kan. So I think harav possibly here means the person who's commenting. He doesn't say, it could be he's referring to, I believe Yosef ibn Habib, I think, was the author of the Ein Yosef. Uh, Although I'm trying to think, could also be Eitz Yosef now that I'm thinking about it. It could be Eitz Yosef, and that's Yosef Zundel, who wrote a wonderful, wonderful commentary on Midrash Rabbah. So that could be it. I'm wondering, and if I go back and look on this, he may be referring to Midrash Rabbah, so it could be Eitz Yosef. All right. So just trying to cover up some, cover some material that I felt I needed to go back on. All right. So remember, we're talking here about the fact that when you depart from someone who is, when you leave, for example, at a funeral or something, and you want to address the person that has passed away, or even before a funeral, if you're in the presence of someone who passes away, you should say to them, before you depart, Lech Bishalom, right? And on the other hand, if you are departing from someone who's living, you should say Lech L'Shalom. And that's what we're discussing right now. And what happens is Torah T'mimah gives examples where people said Lech B'Shalom to someone who was living and it was fine, and the reverse. And he also mentions that this is not mentioned as a formal halacha in several of the codes. So here we go. So discussing the proof that the Gemara uses is they use the fact that Jethro, when he says to Moses, when he departs from Moses, or Moses departs from him, he says, Lech l'shalom. And Moses, of course, succeeds, right? That's what the Gemara mentions. So, v'hinei bera'ayot haGemara mi Yitro ume Avshalom. So Absalom is at the opposite, where he is told Lech b'Shalom, and ultimately he is hanged, right? So these proofs, Sarich Iyun, we need to look at this more carefully. It requires further contemplation. Shaharei matzinu kama pamim. This is the point he's going to make. We see a number of times, Shneimar gam bechai palashon b'shalom, that where there's a conversation and there's a departure, and the person says, he says, Lech b'shalom, and now he gives an example, B'Yaakov, right? With regards to Jacob, and he says, V'shavti b'shalom, and I return b'shalom. There it is. Ve'ein adam poteach piv l'satan, and one should not. There's an expression that you shouldn't say things that are negative, that are likely to have negative consequences. So, for example, you shouldn't talk, for example, of saying, if I die or something like that. You shouldn't say these kinds of things. Be careful what your mouth says. Uvayitro Gufe, and with Jethro himself, Ketiv, it says regarding him, where he says, Ha'am hazeh al makomo yavo b'shalom, right? And he says, and this particular nation will come to its place b'shalom. V'chein b'Yoshua Yud, and likewise in the 10th chapter of Joshua, right? He's giving the references here. This is Shmuel Aleph Ketetz, the first book of Samuel, chapter 29. Memlachim Aleph, the first book of Kings, chapter 24, Kavdalat. Uveyirmiyahu, and in Jeremiah, Mem Gimel, chapter 43. Uh, Divrei Hayamim Bet Yud Chet. This is the book of Chronicles, the second book of Chronicles, chapter 18. Katuv Halashon B'Shalom. There it refers to B'Shalom, with peace. Uvegamara Matzinu, and in the Gemara, we actually find itself, She'amar Rabban Gamliel, the Rabbi Yoshua, that Rabban Gamliel said to Rabbi Yoshua, Bo B'Shalom, come in peace. And it wasn't, Rabbi Yoshua was alive at the time. And that's in Tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 25a. V'imkein, and if this is the case, right, my Ummah, I'm sorry, I want to say, right, Hara'aya me Abshalom levad. And how is this a compelling proof then from Absalom saying that if you use B'Shalom to a living person, it's going to have negative consequences? V'dilma, and possibly rak mikre haya ma shenikra umo. And you could argue, well, maybe it just was, it just so happened. Had nothing to do with the fact that David said to him, go B'Shalom, right? That's then why these negative things happen, and that's the sort of force of the halakha, is you want to be careful as to what you say, as to how you say, whether you use the prefix b or the prefix lamed, that it can have far-reaching consequences. So maybe there really isn't a good proof there. V'lachen nir'eh lomar, right? And for this reason, it is, one should say, one might well use the same argument, right? Kamosha katov hanimukei Yosef, as was written in the Nimukei Yosef. These are, so nimukim are deep, penetrating comments, right, of Yosef, and this is Yosef ibn Chavib, Sof Masechet Moed Katan, I believe. This is at the end of the tractate Moed Katan, and I have a footnote on Yosef. Let's see if I have it somewhere. I thought I looked it up somewhere, but maybe I don't. Okay. I thought I'd looked up about him, all right? Anyway, Gemara lo dibra be'inyan ze ela rak keneged anashim. Okay, so in trying to understand this, because he's raising this particular issue as well, right? That the Gemara was not speaking regarding this subject. It was only speaking against or regarding people, anashim shemenachashim umasimim ra'ayon zeh. Sorry, shemenachashim. I'll put a period there. Right? That it has to do with people who engage in divination, right? Menachashim, right? Umesimim rayon zeh, and place this proof, right? Klala, that is to say, bracha uklala, kemosha katuv b'shem hakotev, right? So he says, that is to say, a blessing and a curse, as is written in the name of the one who's writing this. I think it's talking about the author. Aval, or possibly exactly what it means, b'shem hakotev here, I'm not certain. Is he referring to Yosef ibn Chaviv? Is he referring to someone else, etc.? But regardless, he's saying this halakha has a narrow application, I believe, is what he's saying. Here we go. Aval ba'anashim t'mimim, right? But if we're talking about people who are pure of heart, in other words, who don't engage in divination, she'en choshvim davar ra. Okay, and when we're talking about divination, we're talking about people who look for signs. Okay, so for example, I think the example given in the Gemara at times is like if a deer crosses his path, right? Or people who believe that if they're walking along and a black cat crosses their path. So again, the Menachashim could be people who are, who believe in these kinds of things, right? So this is what he's referring to there. And kol kapitei bazeh. So we don't have to be careful about this, right? If there are people who don't believe in these sorts of things, then we don't have to worry about it. But if we're dealing with people who believe in these kinds of things, you want to be careful. V'yitachen, okay, dehaya kasher le, and it could be that the Nimukei Yosef was also having problems, right? Ma she'arnu, right? What we raised, min hastirot bazeh, regarding the contradictions that are in this particular example. In other words, we showed that even though if you said some in the Bible where someone says, bishalom, use the term bishalom to a living person, it wasn't a problem. And so, and Torah T'mimah is suspicious or suspects that Nimukei Yosef was also having issues regarding this particular problem. V'lachen chidesh davar zeh, and that's why he introduces this novel approach to it, kedei liyashev ha'inyan bichlal, in order to try and harmonize this whole thing. Right, so it's saying it's what you do is you say this halacha depends on a circumstance, right? And if you're dealing with someone who believes in these kinds of things, then don't do it. But if it's just if you're dealing with people who don't have these sorts of beliefs, superstitions, right? If you're dealing with superstitious people, you want to be careful about this sort of thing. Ume'ata, and from this, yesh lomar, you can say, betam hadavar shehishmitu haposkim. And now, right, remember, we had mentioned this before, that if this, in fact, this point of halacha about what you say in a case of someone you're leaving, right, who is departed, right, in other words, who's departed this world, then you could say b'shalom. But if you're leaving someone who's alive, don't use that terminology. So, and we mentioned that this isn't part of the codes. The law codes basically leave this out. It's mentioned in passing in some cases, but why is it left out? And he's saying, if in fact the Nimukei Yosef is correct, we now understand why it's left out. Why the poskim, that is the halachic the halachic advisors, the ones who make these decisors, the halachic decisors, leave this out. Din zeh, this particular law. Ki yaduahu, right? Because we know, kama hishtadlu harishonim, right? That we know to what degree the Rishonim. So Rishonim are people, are rabbis and sages who lived after the close of the Talmud, essentially, up until the publication of the Shulchan Aruch. These are known as Rishonim. And after the publication of the Shulchan Aruch, all the rabbis, all the sages that followed up to this day included, are called Acharonim, the latest, right? The early and the latest. So the Rishonim, and so for example, Rashi is a Rishon, and the Torah T'mimah would be an Acharon. So they tried la'aker ulahashkiach kol inyan nichush bichlal. They tried to uproot and to ignore, right, any issue regarding divination, or I think I'm going to put this in right now as well because I like this superstition. They don't feel Jews should be superstitious. Asher omnam lo na'el Yisrael. Here he goes. Because quite honestly, it is not fitting for a Jew, or right, a people that is enlightened, ha'amin, ha'ma'amin, emunah. So a Jew who should be enlightened and does believe in emunah Torah, in pure faith b'Hashem, in the Lord, levado, alone. In other words, just believes in God alone. Lehishtaka ba'inyanim ka'ela, to occupy themselves, to get buried, so to speak, or to sink, I think would be the best way, to sink into these kinds of things. So here you're seeing that we are absolutely against divination, superstition, these kinds of things, that we see it as the antithesis of belief in God, in one unique and ultimate God. Umekevan de la anashim t'mimim, and since she'en menachashim en k'pnei bazeh, and since to people who are pure-spirited, who don't believe in these sorts of things, like superstitious beliefs, she'ein menachashim, they don't practice this, and k'pnei, so we don't have to be so strict as to the way this law is stated. Lachen, and for this reason, hishmitu kol inyan zeh, they totally left out, right? They excised this particular topic, Lama'an yishtaka kol inyan nechush, in order to, uh, basically bury, right, to ignore any issue of superstition. V'holech betom yelech betach. And someone who goes in the simplicity of his heart should go reassured and not worry that if somebody says to them, Lech בשלום, that something awful is going to happen to them. So it's very, I mean, these are things that we certainly deal with to this day. And it's interesting to see what the Torah T'mimah has to say about this. Going on. Let's find the place. Okay. El Avotecha B'Shalom. So remember, God has said to Abraham that his descendants are going to be enslaved for 400 years, etc., and they're ultimately going to come out in redemptive way. But it says, but as for you, you're going to go to your fathers B'Shalom in peace, right? So, in other words, that he is not going to have to face these particular kinds of things. So, Tanya, again, early source, Gadol HaShalom. Peace is great. She'afilu hametim tzrichim l'shalom. Because even those who are dead or who die, but I think we're talking about people who are deceased, even deceased people, tzrichim l'shalom, they also need peace. Shinemar, as it says, Va'ata tavo el avotecha b'shalom. So this expression, tavo el avotecha, you will come to your fathers, means you will die, right? It's a euphemistic way of saying you're going to pass, and you're going to pass in peace, with peace. And this is from the Sifrei. It's a commentary. Sifrei is a commentary on Numbers and Deuteronomy. And here he's referring the way it's organized, Parshat Naso. It's in the book of Numbers, right? Parshat Naso. You'll find this particular statement. So what do we mean? What kind of peace? Inyan hashalom nir'eh. So why does it talk about a person who's in this, has passed away and who requires peace? Nir'eh, it would appear, belo onshim ba'olam ha'amet, that he is not going to have to face punishment or punishments in the world of truth. The world of truth is the world that we go to once we pass out of this world. This world is known as the world of lies, and part of the reason is because of the level of dishonesty in the world, and also the fact that there are people who have done some pretty dishonest things and appear to have succeeded very, very well. But in the next world, the consequences are all there. And so not having to face, so whatever you don't, so again, this is the one way to understand adversity, that when you face adversity, you're clearing your record, and you're going to face a clean record as you move into the next world. And it's a way of trying to say and deal with adversity and not allowing it to get you down, and to say, this too is for the best, and to try to keep heart when you're facing adversity. So it's part of traditional philosophy. Going on, V'ien Baramban. So Nachmanides apparently has some, in his commentary on the Torah, has some things to say about this particular idea. Going on. Let me find it. Okay. We're back here. Would be verse 16. So let's take a look. So here's 15. Tavo el avotecha b'shalom. Okay. Tikaver b'seva tova. You will be buried with ripe old age. V'dor revi'i, but the fourth generation, Yashuvu Hena, will return here. Kilo Shalem. This is so interesting because Avon Ha'emori Ad Hena, because the iniquity of the Amorites has not been filled to this point. This raises an interesting issue that basically it's saying that God can tolerate up to a certain point of sinfulness. And what this is saying is that the Amorites at that point hadn't reached they'd filled up and, to the top any grace that they might have received or mercy or anything that they had really gotten to a point. They hadn't gotten to a point yet where God was going to have to give them the consequences at this at this stage of their existence. So interesting idea that there is a certain point at which you have used up all whatever credits you have in terms of sinfulness, and at that point the consequences are devastating. But up to this point, what Abraham's being told is that the Amorites who lived there hadn't actually gotten to that particular point. So, fourth generation will return here. Dor Revi'i, fourth generation. Ha'av zocher leben. So, from looking at all the information that also surrounds this particular concept here, it's saying a father credits Lavan to his son, b'mispar hadorot lefanav, right, regarding the generations that precede him. And I believe the lefanav is referring to the son, vahu hakates, and we're referring here to the kates. The kates means sort of the end. It means the end, like the end of time, like the Messianic era, the Olam Haba. And what we're saying is that the father is capable of passing on the merit of his own behavior. That is to say, that while there's a certain stipulated time before the Messianic era, however, if people start to behave in a righteous kind of way, that Messianic era might occur earlier. And what we're saying here is that a father is able to give that particular idea, right, that particular dynamic to his son. Shenemar, as it says, and this is Isaiah 41, Kore Hadarot me Rosh. So essentially it means he calls out the generations from the beginning. And here we go. Afalpi, so this is how they understand it. Afalpi shene'emar, that despite the fact that it says va'avdum va'anuotam, that it says they shall serve and they will serve them and they will afflict them, that is, the Israelites will serve them and the Egyptians will afflict them. Arba me'ochana, 400 years. V'ne'emar, and it states v'dor revi'i Yeshua hena. But it still says, right? It goes on to say, but a fourth generation will return here. Well, we know if we're talking about four generations after Abraham, we're not talking about 400 years. A generation isn't 100 years, not even back in those times. Okay, so that's the point that's being made here, that it's possible that God is saying to Abraham, even though the stipulated time is 400 years, nevertheless, whatever good deeds, whatever acts of righteousness are performed will be passed on to the sons, to the descendants accordingly. So here we have the commentary. Harbe bi'urim ne'emru ba'agadazo. He says there are many explanations. I mean, clearly, what we've been reading has it raises a lot of puzzles and things at exactly what's being said here. And not only that, the concept itself is somewhat puzzling. So it says there are many explanations regarding this particular piece of midrashic and legendary material. But it seems to me the haschia b'mispar hadorot, that credit, right, in the number of generations, he me'ein haschuyot ha'acherot. It is simply one of other, right, other credits, so to speak, ha'amurot od b'mishnah, that are said further in the Mishnah. Sheha'av zoche livno, that a father can benefit, right? Can credit his son. So here we go. Here's some of the other things. Nui means how handsome he is, good looks. Bekoach, strength. Be'osher, I believe here it's talking about wealth. Bechokhmah, in wisdom. So that these are things that can be passed on from one generation to the next. Verotzono lomar, and what he wants to say, the point he's trying to make is, de kamo de im ha'av hu bal tor. It's saying that if in fact the father is a good-looking person, Gibor, he's a courageous person. Ashir, he's wealthy. O Chacham, or wise. Hu Morish Kazeh al Harov. It's cute how he puts this in square brackets, that he will bequeath in these particular qualities. Al Harov, he says, for the most part. Torah T'mimah is very aware that there are exceptions to this. Leave naught to his son. Kach, and likewise, im haya ha'av mimishpacha miyuchesed, and likewise, if the father was from a pedigreed family, who morish zechut hayachas, he is also going to bequeath the credit of being pedigreed, livnot, to his son, ulivnei vanav, and his descendants, sheyit yachasu acharav, who will be pedigreed following him. Umevi raya mi pasuk zeh, and in those cases it brings proof from this particular verse. The afal pi sheshibud Yisrael talah Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'mispar shanim, that despite the fact that the slavery, the enslavement of the Jewish people, the Holy One calculated it according to the number of years, Arba Ma'ot Shana, 400 years, Aval Kesheyavo Ketz HaGeula, but however, when the time of redemption comes, Yaskirem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, is going to consider them lo b'mispar gevul hashanim, not regarding the definition, right? Or literally it means the amount of time of years. Rak bischut avotehem, but only regarding the merit of their fathers. Ukemoshe katavti, and as I wrote, he says, V'dor revi'i yeshuva hena. It says, and the fourth generation will return here. Hena hine talah geula. In fact, indeed, he makes the redemption dependent b'mispar hadorot, in the number of generations, v'lo b'mispar shanim, and not with the number of years. Ulefi habiur hazeh, and according to this particular understanding, this explanation, hevez chutze me'enas chiyot hakudmot. So we can say that this particular credit is also similar to the preceding merits. V'gam hemshech dabuk leklal hadvarim. And I'm looking to see, okay, and maybe exactly what he means here, I'm not certain. Literally, it means, and also what is continued, right? Something that's continued is attached to these general words. And what he's referring to here, I'm not sure if he's saying whether even beyond that. V'gam hemshech, meaning not just his son, but even further generations, right, are included in this particular concept. And this is where we're going to stop for today. And I invite you to make some comments if you'd like. So I'm going to stop the share. Okay. Any thoughts? Mead, I see you're off mute.
Yes,
Hi, Judith.
I'm
Go ahead.
demuted. You got to watch
Yes.
out now.
Right.
No, I think it is an interesting, almost grandfatherly approach to the interpretation of the rewards in future generations if, you know, if things turn out right. Because, as a grandparent, I look at the grandchildren and say, okay, this is the reward. The kids are work. And you can never say that you necessarily succeeded, but if the grandchildren are coming along, it was worth it. And I think this is sort of what he's
Hmm.
he's getting at least to me.
Okay. No, that's very nice. So with in the way I'm trying to see it is that were we to understand the degree to which our lives are intertwined and the degree and that what the Gemara is trying to bring out here is how our behavior and our
Yes.
qualities affect future generation, that it isn't just about us,
No,
right?
the
And this,
reward is yet to come.
right. Well, that's a difference. That's a different idea.
Well, all right.
This is saying right now, how I behave is going to affect my
Sure.
progeny,
Yes.
even beyond my immediate child.
Yes.
But that and this is part of at least this would support my contention that the sub one of the main subjects of religion is the issue of significance. And if we're saying that your behavior can deeply affect not only your children, but subsequent generations, both positive in a and certainly in a very, very, very positive kind of way,
Yep.
that puts a lot of significance on your life.
Yes. But negative as well.
Yes, well, that's also significant, for
Yes.
sure, for sure.
Well,
But sometimes,
tell me what happened to Rob, uh,
oh,
his
okay,
son. Tell
yeah,
me what happened to that child.
I know. These are things that I know, right? Yes, we're talking for
Yeah.
if anybody's watching this uh, years from now, we're talking about the tragic murder of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle by their son, by one of their sons, who
Yes.
had a severe drug problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, Harlan, these are very hard things. The only thing, I can hope for is that one of the premises of our tradition is that we don't have to over worry over much the events of this world because in comparison to the amount of time that took place before we were born and the amount of time that's going to take place after we pass on, we're talking about a speck in time in comparison, and yet there is a future. So if in fact, that we all know that we all face the same fate, but how we live this brief little period, is going to have a great effect, not only on our own future, what we're learning today, but on the future of our children. So, I can only hope that wherever Rob and Michelle are now, that they are gaining all the beauty and the rewards of all the good that they did in this world, as I would wish for anybody. But there's no doubt that the fact that that this one son murdered them is unspeakably tragic. No doubt about it. I think it affected a lot of us because Rob Reiner was such an icon.
Yes.
I'm going to stop the recording here.